Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Trend in Mind. This is Trend in Mind 23, and we're looking at the fear of rejection. As always, we're going to have another fun and informative conversation this afternoon. So please like, share the broadcast, tell one of your friends to come and add their 2 or 3 cents. We'll be back shortly.
What is knowledge? And how much of it must we acquire in order to better our lives? What makes some forms of knowledge seemingly more advantageous than others? What fuels this desire to learn and to know and to understand? And how much of what we learn is actually applied to the bettering of our lives? Is it necessary to know in order to grow? Join us, a group of former Guyanese high schoolers and our special guests, as we chat about the things we need to know and about education and the process of learning in the tech age. This is The Trending Mind, Friday evenings at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time on Facebook and YouTube.
Okay, we're going to get right into the heart of the topic this evening by starting at the lighter side of the conversation. And what we want to do is to go into different environments and look at, the whole issue of rejection and the fear thereof. Now, the first environment is that of the dance hall or the bottom house dance or the party, whatever we want to call it, right? Now, I'm assuming that everybody here had some party days. Checking in with you, Antoine.
What you got to ask me? What you want to come? You looking at a young poet like me and ask him. You looking. But I can tell you though, them bottom house party was always nice, and especially when they got a good cook up going, and you got some good Banks beer and some XM, and the music hot, man. Look, you're left there till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, moving on.
All right, so I'm going to place the 2 ladies on our panel in the spot here.
Mm-hmm.
Given that the males in that environment tended to be the victims of rejection, generally. So, Renito, what would lead a young lady in a party to reject a young man's advances when he comes asking for a dance? Educate us.
So let me see this, because this is complex. This is multi-layered and complex. Seriously. Let me hear.
Well, are we doing like age groups? We talking about the bottom house party, right?
Yeah,
So
that'd be when you were basically when you were in high school.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. If they came aggressively, that would kind of like grab your hand, let's dance. Or if they had an attitude like you better don't say no, some of them was so confident that they figured that you would never say no. If you detected any type of sweaty and stuff like that,
Okay.
if you observe them, what they called renting a tile back in the days, like have somebody pinned on a wall or something, and you recognize that they do that. So those were the things that would have made me reluctant. You know, if they're sweaty and you could see their clothes and perspiring and were aggressive and asking you for a dance. But if they were, that's how I would reject.
That's how you would reject.
I would tend to say, and I was very nice. I would say, not this. I don't like this song, or maybe the next song. Because
When you set yourself up there, come again.
right, but I didn't want to hurt people's feelings growing up like that. Like, no. So you kind of just like say, not right now. I'm having a conversation. You came up with something.
What about you, Michelle? What were your reasons? What were your reasons?
Pretty much some of the same reasons it would have been. Unlike Renita, though, I didn't really care. If you didn't look attractive, you didn't look attractive. If I didn't care for you, I didn't care for you. So, if a guy isn't dressed the correct way, if the shoes didn't look too right, sometimes they have these shine shoes. Sometimes the pants didn't fit in too right. And then, you had the popular guys, I think it was Shine Bike in my time. And, they have the nickel bikes and they have the, the ice gold and green belts and, they're not so nerdy looking. Of course, you're gonna you want them to you want them to notice you, but some of the others, no, not at all.
And those who wore those itchy turtleneck sweaters that they got from
the US.
Yes,
American, hot.
Yes, and itchy was wool, and that there was scratches. No.
And then because we were so cliquish, you kind of knew from school. Yeah. So who was popular, who ran, who was just a nerd, who whatever, and so you didn't want. It was a lot of branding by name.
Right.
So. Me myself might have, been suffering from some amount of rejection, trying to get into some of the cliques,
Okay.
While you're making styles on somebody who might be interested,
That's an interesting one. Terrence and Compton, how did you guys deal with rejection on the dance floor?
I think you gotta let Compton go first, boy.
Personally, I would just suck it up and move on. Like, if Renita says next time, so be it, my brother. Just say a thumbs up or something like that. Smile. Next time.
Next time.
Next time.
How about you, Terrence?
No, well, I see this is a real. I just remember this whole thing here, right? This is a very painful moment. You know what? Remember what we used to call this thing? Baking pone.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah.
This would be for the boys after the party. This would be a whole set of hours where men identified men who bake pone.
Exactly.
Yes, and it was not pleasant. I can tell you that.
Or holding up the wall.
Yeah. So I mean, look, I think this is this kind of rejection. It's interesting to talk about this in the context of Guyana. In a way, when we were growing up, this is the one place, looking back on it now, where the power was completely with women in this context, right? So it's sort of men have to get up and walk over and ask, and then
in a polite manner,
no.
In a polite manner, actually bending,
and usually. Yeah, they're there with their friends, so everyone sees it. And before you go to the party, there's a big talk about like what you plan to do. And so then when you do what you plan to do, or what you plan to do and work out in the evening, now coming back home, walking home from the party is a whole ridicule.
Exactly.
So. Yeah, this is a very interesting and
now looking back, you guys had to walk across the floor, so if you gotta know, everybody knew.
yeah. So you were open, right? You're very vulnerable. You have to walk and ask, and then
Act politely.
said, no. And then you have to maintain the decorum, and you have to shake your head
Exactly.
and walk back over.
Exactly.
So it was
Or
not
you start
exactly.
talking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we call it shaka. Antoine,
At Edmonton, we used to call
Antoine,
Shaki,
this kind
just
of
because of
rejection,
this.
in the field of psychiatry, psychology, how is this addressed, and is it something? Is it in this? We just looking at this environment, the dance environment. Is it something that we should take very seriously?
I think that the construct of rejection is built into our fabric as humans. It's something that we do. And sometimes consciously and unconsciously, we choose who we want to associate with for a number of different benefits. For women, for the continued genital relationship, for procreation, for survivability, for economics, for security. So there are a number of different reasons why we select who we want to be with and who we choose not to. And it is interesting that we're having this conversation about a bottom house party as young people, because a couple of things, and I was really listening to hear what Renita was going to say in terms of the number of different levels and the number of different factors that are playing into that entire dynamic. So if we were to just simply extract a tableau out of that whole performance and analyze that dynamic, a young man dressed the best that he could with whatever material or clothing he might have got. It might have just come in a barrel from foreign yesterday. Okay? And it might be 90 degrees in the bottom house because it packed and everybody hot, but he is going to wear his turtleneck today because that is what just come in a barrel and it's smelling like foreign still. So he is dressed to the nines. So let's carve this tableau out. Music blaring, a big open dance floor. No girl wants to be the first person on the dance floor. Okay, because right away she is exposed. So she's only going to go out and dance when others have gone out to dance.
Click.
Because she doesn't want to be embarrassed. She doesn't want to be the first person going to dance with somebody who may or may not know how to dance. And then that can be shame and embarrassment. Nobody's going to want to come and dance with she. But there are a number of different dynamics that are taking place there. And as Terence was saying just now, it's the vulnerability to walk across this wide expanse. It's like crossing the Pacific Ocean to go and ask this woman for a dance. It's like the dance floor has an eternity. It's like eternity to get across there. He's got to build up the courage to go do this. So here's what's happening on one plane. It is part of his psychosocial development to build his confidence, his own self-confidence, his own sense of self, that he's able to take risks, he's able to step forward and do something, knowing fully well that he's exposed, that he's going to be vulnerable. Okay? But on a primordial biological perspective, he is driven to do that because as a teenager, as an adolescent, his testosterone levels are raging through his blood. And we're in a hypermasculine environment that says he's got to have sex at some point in time. Before this night is out, he got to get it with a girl. Or he's got to set the whole process up because of the hypermasculinity that is involved. So there are a number of different things playing out on his side. On her side, it is the beginnings. So let's say she's a young woman, a teenager. She's already beginning to experience her period. So she's already beginning this biological countdown. She is on a mission. She is now being very careful because she needs to identify the possible partner that can suit with her for the future. In as much as we may scoff and deride the possibility of all of this dynamic taking place on a dance floor, these are the underlying factors that are playing in here. Because how many women will tell you, I met my husband on a dance floor in a bottom house party? Okay? Because they'll probably tell you, oh, I tell him no the first time he come and ask me for dance. But he kept coming back. And she can then tell you, after having a conversation, why did he keep coming back? And he can then say, because I saw something in you that I liked and I wanted to be with you, that I was attracted to you, that I wanted to spend my time with you. So I kept coming back, even though you keep telling me no. And why would she be telling him no? Whatever were the reasons, she may have been attracted to him too. But because of the friend she was with, she could not seem or appear to be too easy to give in to him. So she got to tell him no. So she got to play hard to get. Okay? But secretly, she's waiting. Please come back again and ask me for another dance. Please come back again and ask me for another dance. But what I'm saying is, it's the underlying dynamics that are driving this. Because it is the beginnings of our search for long-term companionship and building relationships. That is why back in those days, we had those bottom house parties. We had the school hall dance party, okay? Because there were opportunities that were created so that we can get together and begin to sift out, who is it I would like to be with? Who is it I would like to connect with? Who is it that I find? And so, yes, Renita, he come to you and he's sweaty and he got on the turtleneck and he pants and he this. So there are also a lot of unspoken language. His body language, his body posture, his face expression. What does his smile look like? What you look at his face, you look at his shoulders, you look at his hips. You might even look at the potential bulge in his pants and see, well, oh, is this something that is satisfactory enough, or would I feel engaged enough with that? Okay, he's going to look at your potential, as we would say, your rack. So you look at his breast, you look at her breasts, you look at her hips. So these are all things that we choose to do, to look at, because we do a measurement. We kind of do a quick, like a Borg scan. We scan to see if certain elements are compatible with our desires, our wishes, what we want to get out of this relationship. The rejection sometimes can have a number of different effects. One is it can scar us for life. The other way is that we like, you know what? I don't care that she said no. I'm going to go back and ask her again. And I'll keep going back and asking her. So that is persistence. Or, all right, I ain't going back to she because she took some time-ish. I know what she's fronting. I know she thinks she's a tall. She must think she thinks she's a queen of Sheba. I ain't going back to, I'm going to ask somebody else. So he goes and he asks someone else. And that person says, okay, I'll dance. Okay. And in his mind, he's sending his first foray a message. You see, you turned me down, but she take me and I got you now. We dancing the whole night. Okay. So it's a bit of a game. It's a bit of a back and forth, but there are also underlying psychosocial issues that are going on that are driving this. Are you guys with me?
Be with you. Okay, folks,
Right.
we're looking at the issue of rejection. Please remember to like, share the broadcast. We'll be back with you in just a few seconds. Okay.
I got caught.
Sorry. We want to look at what I would say the rejections which seem not to have a rationale against the rejection, which, one can seem to understand. And I will use myself as an example. Now, Renita spoke about, and Michelle, anyone approaching them and that person is rude or just badly dressed, they would, most likely tend to say no. Now, Renita, I know you lived in South, and Terrence and Compton, I know how much experience y'all had in South, but them South girls didn't easy, right?
No, they weren't.
No.
What part of South you live, Renita?
No,
you're on mute. You're on mute. What?
No, I was
What part of South you live, Renita?
South Rockville Park.
Oh, the other side. Okay, because I was in the gardens. All right.
Yeah. Well, these were the days of toots and calm dances on Greenheart Street, right? And I decided to be, now typically I would run away from any dance that, got the little bad boys with the tight shirt and the fancy bike and thing. All right. Anyway, so I'm at this Greenheart Street party, baking pone for a while. I up this young lady, nobody else don't seem to be dancing with her and things. So I make a move. She looks at me and gives me the sweetest of smiles, and then tells me, no, I don't dance with guys with spectacles. Now for me,
listen to me. You have my deep, because I know the hurt your feelings in many ways.
Oh, goodness.
I mean, in fairness, I was the only guy around the place with spectacles. I don't know how, right? I mean, I know, you had other people who eyes didn't too good and thing, but and it really baffled me, and she was smiling as she said this thing. So, what I want to look at here, Antoine, is what might seem to me not to be, a rational reason as against, the rude person or the overly aggressive person. Within the field, is there any difference in how we look?
Yes, there is. Yes, there is in terms of natural selection. So Renita said she would not go with a rude boy. So would Dr. Lord. Okay, that's fine. But there are other girls who may choose to go with a bad boy because the bad boy to them represents a source of strength and masculinity and hypermasculinity. And that bad boy is somebody who they perceive will defend them. Okay? Whereby on the flip side, they may not want to go with you with glasses because back in those days, wearing glasses was seen as a physical defect. So they don't want to go with somebody who wearing glasses because you may not be able to defend them. You may not be able to see if your glasses get knocked off. You can't see. Okay? So I ain't going with you because you wearing and they may like you look too brainy, too bookish. I ain't. So you got both sides, but again, it comes back to natural selection. Okay? And it is what we do consciously and unconsciously. We do it for a variety of reasons, as I outlined before. But understand this too, that as part of that natural selection, there is an actual purpose for it. Because if you weren't rejected because of your glasses several years ago, you may not have developed the internal fortitude and confidence that you would have needed to be able to propose to your current wife. You understand? So how you manage that rejection then assists with building you internally so that you then begin to craft in your own internal self-control and self that these are things that I will and won't do. These are behaviors and attitudes and things that I will and will not do because I need to survive. And how do I enhance or develop my own self-confidence so that when I step forward, I will not be rejected. And even if I am still rejected, how do I turn that around and make that into something for me, because my survival is at stake here. Okay? And this goes back to early childhood as well. This goes back to since infancy, because we know that there's evidence of mothers who reject their children. We know that there are evidence of children who reject each other, siblings. So for a variety of reasons, these things take place. Recent research has indicated that it's not just when I look at Dr. Blackman's face and I do a scan of Dr. Blackman's face, I'm looking at geometric patterns that associate or I identify with or find relationship in my brain. That is something that is primordial, that is something that's inherited. But I'm also looking that when I meet Dr. Blackman in person, I am looking at the unspoken, at the chemical pheromones that are exerted, that exude from him, to see how those pheromones interact with me. So there are a number of different things that are taking place on the biological and even deeper levels that we don't see, that inform why we make decisions, why we do things, why we reject.
Okay.
You understand?
Yep.
Which informs our choices about people that we interact with. Okay?
Okay.
So I might see you, so simply, Andy, I might see you on this screen, and I'm like, okay, Andy looks a nice person and so forth. But I meet you in person, I'm like, hell no, I don't really care to be around Andy anymore. Because on the screen, I have an image through a video camera that I am seeing your outline, your face. Okay, they may be they may be symmetrically pleasing to me, to my eyes, receptive, acceptable. But when I see you in person, it takes on a whole new different perspective. And I may reject you outright because of that. And you may feel that, oh, you've had such a rapport with Antoine on camera that you feel that we are good. So when I reject you outright in person, you are baffled. You are confused. You're like, what did I do? Why did Antoine? Why? What happened? You may not understand it. And I may not be aware that I did it because it's just happening. Does that make sense to you guys?
No.
Yes,
Very
yes.
nice.
Yeah.
Yes, it certainly does.
I would like to go back a little bit to what was said earlier in terms of power and relationships, because in that environment, while to me as a society, in at the age group we were in, to me the dance floor, the dance hall leveled the playing field. It broke down some of the stereotyping and allowed one to break those stereotypes. And for me, for example, I mean, you guys talk about something. I know I many nights I went to parties in lodge by the burial ground, opposite the burial ground, many nights there. So
That's a rough neighborhood. That's by the YY yard. Off between Princess and Norton Street. What's wrong with you?
young, it was literally, I was putting myself out there to experience something that I would not normally do. So for me, I see it more of a maturing and being able to, because in the dance hall, you're not on the streets. There is as I said, there seems to be a leveling of the playing field, that you can speak with someone outside of your social group, that you can ask someone outside of your social group to come and dance. So for me, that's how I see it. So while there was power play, I see it more of a leveling of the playing field in the society that we were moving in.
Okay. Thank you for that, Compton. Dr. Blackman, as you were listening and as you think back, what lessons do you think you would have been able to grab from those moments of rejection?
I have to say there were many. So so I think I learned a lot of lessons. I mean, I guess I was one of the nerds who had an interest in sports. So I was sort of like a sport. That's what I became, right? So I made a conscious decision, I think, to avoid the sort of, the girlfriend boyfriend part of the story. So I focused more on the school thing and on the sports thing. And so I think that that's sort of it, in a way, shaped my character and my outlook and so on. Because at some point, I think I just couldn't deal with the walking across the floor and getting rejected. I do it a couple of times, and enough for me. I had a fairly good sense of I like me, and I figured this rejection is not good for me. So I said, let me focus on things that I could control, just like you ask about like the rationality and this kind of thing. I figured let me focus on these things I could control. I could control the CXC, the GCE. I could control the basketball, the cricket ball, the athletics. These things I decide. Well, look, this is better for me, and yeah. So I guess that's a personal story. My reaction to this was, look, this is not a game that I'm going to win. I already see that, I take off let me put on my glasses. Yeah. See, as a man wearing glasses, I don't wear glasses all the time, but as a man with the propensity to wear the glasses, I sort of figured, look, this is not a game I can win. I can be able to hit a cricket ball pretty good. I can be able to shoot a basketball pretty good. I can be able to do some math pretty good. I can be able to do some physics pretty good. And this could be the identity for me in this setup, rather than like I was laughing about this. I mean, I have friends who, we have these various names, and one friend in particular, we would call him Sharky, because all he would do was shark, and he, and this was good. But I felt like maybe I wasn't going to win this game. And so I focused on other games that I felt I were better positioned to win. So I do think that, those experiences shaped us in ways that even today we respond to the cues, like Antoine was just pointing out. We respond to the cues. We even in our professional lives now, we see people. We kind of make a quick judgment, and that judgment is coming from some of these earlier experiences about how we interact with people, and the kinds of relationships that we imagine can be formed with these individuals, and how we proceed. But I think, if I'm honest, I have to say that yes. I mean, I was one of the people who just, and it's still in the way today, right? I mean, I'm still someone who has a very small number of intimates who in this context, and in other areas, I have more proclivity, but in this area, I think my early lessons led me to realize that this was not exactly the area that I was going to be very, very strong in.
Are you admitting that easy lesson is good for dunks?
No. I just channeled my rejections into other areas.
I just want to know if it's that he had two left foot and he couldn't dance.
Well, this was also the thing. Someone mentioned this, right? I mean, even now we marvel at this. We have friends who can really dance properly. And so, if you never learned how to do this, there's a moment there where, when they start, and it was a very regimented set of sets that they would play.
Mm-hmm.
The soul would come on at one time, the kind of bubbling music come on at one time. And then at some point there's the music for the oldies, the music for,
waltzing.
And so now if you don't have a clue, you're not going to get it done. None of the women are standing up on the floor with you, shuffling about, not looking
Stepping
like
on
what
their
you're doing. Yeah, it's embarrassing. So you got to decide at that moment to cut your losses and sit down.
But listen to this. When I was in national service,
after, right? Yes.
when I was in national service, I was at Papaya, and somehow or the other, the corporal who was in charge of our barrack room, our company, saw that I could dance because my sister had taught me to dance many years ago. And when every Saturday night they would have a center party, bring everybody together for this big center party, and night after night, nobody would want to get up and dance. So you have music playing, and there's a ring around the entire big space. Everybody is sitting there, nobody here moving. And the man come to me one night. The man said, Craig, well, I need you to go and find a girl and open this dance floor. I was like, what? I was like, I know. He's like, you have to do it. If you don't, go take off your civilian clothes, put on uniform, and report for guard duty. One night I refused. I had to go back to my barracks and take off my civilian clothes and put on my uniform and go report for guard duty that night, while everybody else is dancing at the party. So from then on, there was one girl that I'd already identified, and she and I were friends. I told her what was up, and as soon as we all gathered and this music started playing, I make a beeline for her, grab her, she and I start dance. That was the way that I could get around that. You know what I mean?
Okay. All right. Michelle and Renita, let's shift to, just after high school, your early 20s. Were you aware of the power dynamics? Were you conscious of the kind of power you had in that environment? And as you look back now, were you strategic with the knowledge, Michelle?
I'm going to start from looking back. I don't think I was strategic with the knowledge. I came up in a society that spoke to covering up yourself. So when I think about my shape now to what it was back then, I mean, I had something that was good, and I didn't know that at that time because you came from a culture where you cover up, and I grew up in an Adventist home. So, me getting together and get my little party, and I was very happy for it. In terms of moving around, and no, I don't think I ever felt that I was the one in a position of power, right? I always felt like, men had so many choices. There were so many different women who, liked them, and, they could choose other persons, and you're lucky if they, so I think when I listen to what you guys are saying now about how you felt and how nervous you were, I never really thought that you guys were nervous, or I thought you were doing what you do, and this is how you play the field, and this is what you come to do. And then, you're going to go to the other side of the party and try to find somebody else to dance with. And, and I don't know. I saw it quite different from what you guys are seeing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Renita?
For me, I never thought that I attracted anybody much. And in my later years, people told me I always had this face, like, don't talk to me, don't approach me. I always had like this mean look, mean girl look. So I don't know. Huh? So
I still love it.
Yeah, so I don't think that we were even aware that we had this amount of power. I don't think that was like the focus that you have this power. You could almost do what you want to do and stuff. I don't think we were aware of that. So I don't know, because when I'm speaking to people, I don't always like you. Why you never said anything? You ever saw your face? Well, you had this rude look, and then I was told I had this mouth that if they said the wrong thing, I would go fire right back. So I think that's true. But other than that, I didn't think I played it strategically at all.
And then the other thing is, Renita, so we came up in an era when I don't know if you guys remember that song, Little Miss Hard to Get. How do you do, Miss Hard to Get? I love you. So a woman, a lady, should not be like this is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to refuse you. We're supposed to say no. And you're supposed to come back and keep hunting. You're not supposed to just shut down, you know. You're supposed to continue. So that's where I think that was the where I function. And I do believe before many other of my peers might have changed their view, I changed my view on a number of things that we did in Guyana. I think I was seeing things different from much earlier, but the culture that we came up in again, the men are supposed to chase you. You know, they used to say this other thing. I have my I have my cow, I have my bull, you better hold your heifer. So, as a mother of girls, you have to make sure you take care of them and make sure that they're not running around because the bull is running around and the bull is going to pick up, you know, whoever the bull wants. So you got to try and hold, you know, all these things. Ah, I don't think I wish we could have had a conversation at that time.
Right. Okay. Compton, as you're listening to Michelle and Renita speak, are you surprised to hear that they weren't necessarily aware that they had a certain kind of power in their hand?
No, as I said, for me, I view it more of a at that time is putting myself out there literally because the my home life didn't have that. So for me, going to lodge and going to Kitty and wherever else, Prashad Nagar, you know, as a matter of fact, there was a group of us from my high school days where we would look to see where's the next dance, where's the next dance happening. So that that's what we would do. So I joined that group or was part of that group because I wanted to experience something I couldn't do in my normal school day. So for me, it's really trying out the field, but not in a but in a way of to grow up and to mature.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Blackman, now in your field, you guys will have a lot of exchanges on ideas and concepts and hypotheses and themes and so on. Have you dealt with the rejection of ideas? You know, maybe you sit in and there's this great concept comes to mind, and you know you put it over to a colleague, and the reaction is not what you were
Yeah,
expecting. Have you dealt with that kind of rejection in your field?
yeah. This when I first thought about the topic, this is exactly what I wanted to bring to the fore. For me, in the academic world, rejection is a daily part of the game, right? So if you and I was thinking maybe this is good. This early dancehall rejections prepared me well for an academic career, right? When you write grants and you send them to the NSF, uh, 8 times out of 10 they get rejected, and so you have to put them back in, right? So almost all of the time when you write a paper and you send it to a publisher, they will send it back to you. Recently I was working on something, and they sent this thing back to me almost 3-4 times, right? So they send it back. They said, something not right here, you fix that, you send it. They send it back again, say something not right here. And part of the business is you got to take the rejection and write and fix what needs to be fixed and continue on. So yeah, I mean, I think that's what I thought about first when I started thinking about the topic. I wasn't kind of really reflecting on the Guyana side of the ball, but I think in jobs, business opportunities, many quite often, in the American sort of racial hierarchy, sometimes you go into a situation. I mean, uh, simple things like when you're in Manhattan late at night and you flag down a car and it's empty and you go to the car and the guy look at you and he see you and he said, "Well, no, I'm not going to Brooklyn," or you go to a real estate place and they have a house that you're looking at and they say, well, finally when they meet you and they look at you and they say, well, maybe someone else someone just got this apartment before you. So there's a lot of this idea of rejection in our regular life, and I think for me as an academic, it's par for the course. I think you put 8 things. If you put 10 things out, 8 of them, this is routine. It will get sent back to you, and so if you are not someone who can ride the rejection and not lose your sense of self and the sense of the rightness of your ideas and the sense of what you think is important and why you ought to fight for it, I think you're in trouble. So rejection in this kind of easy way of being in a party and women not dancing, or being fortunate, the thing is, in a way, in this normal game, in this American game that we play, it's really important to be able to ride this rejection, and it comes to us every single day in every single aspect of our lives. And I think that's one of the things that quite often we haven't. I'll say this: the thing that I and this conversation is bringing up, the thing that I sort of worry the most about is, like we are kind of, we have children who are born in the United States and they've grown up in the United States, and the sense of, they don't have, I think, this kind of grit to kind of manage these issues of rejection in the same way that we have naturally come to, so it doesn't, at least at this point in my life, it doesn't hurt me for someone to say, okay, you didn't I don't like what you're doing, no, do it again, so on. But I can see already in my children their I don't know what's the word for that, their lack of, in our parlance, we'd say they're a little soft, that they can't they can't manage. They put their heads down when the rejection comes, and they can't push on through it. So it's not just a question of Guyana. Maybe in as we listen to each other here, I think there is something to be said for this kind of harshness, if you will, of the Guyana set. As Antoine and as Renita and as Michelle pointed out, when we have our bad turtleneck and we're not pressed right and we don't have the right shoes and we don't have all the right things that they're looking for, and they say no, then we learn how to go back. After the night of tantalized walking home from the thing, we say, well, next time I can get better shoes. Next time I press my pants right. Next time I can get the right shirt. So we learn how to do this kind of thing, and it's something that I think we're not. At least in my own personal sense, I feel sometimes that I'm not transmitting that ethos to my children as effectively as I should, and maybe I'm not in the right culture to transmit it to them. So that's a thought.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for that, Michelle. Let's go into your field, education. Renita was just saying, rejections are stepping stones to success. Terrence was indicating that, it's, we actually learn from these processes. Now, like we know, riding a bike, it is expected that you will fall, you will bruise your knees a few times, you know. We don't really raise an alarm about that. You know, it's part. A child walking, you know, it's going to be. We'll find it abnormal if they don't fall a few times before being able to actually move on two legs. In your field, when does it? When do you think rejection actually becomes a problem where it can lead to a mental health issue, where it's not just simply part of the process of learning?
So I want to say that this is where we introduce culture, because some of the things you said is acceptable because we should expect to fall when we're riding a bike is not necessarily acceptable here. So a kid here would have pads on their knees,
Exactly.
helmet,
It's-
hand guards, all kinds of things just in case they fall, because they're not accustomed to what we consider normal, right? I remember dressing and leaving the house, and if my sisters don't like the dress, they'll come out on the patio and laugh at you. They prefer to laugh, you know, and that was okay. Like you don't care, you continue your way, you happy and your stuff, you know. But that's not the way, and I think Terrence touched on it. That's not the way it is done here. Mental health and social emotional learning is extremely important in America, which means that the way the rejection is received by the child is very important. So if a child begins to exhibit the certain types of behaviors that allow them, and it can play out two ways. It can play out with the child saying, you know, I'm trying to please. I want to please everybody, so I'm never gonna say no. I'm doing work for everybody. I'm always willing to jump up and clean the board. I'm always willing to take your bag. I want to push the garbage around the cafeteria, because the child is trying to be loved because of that rejection. Or another child may shut down and just become angry and go off in a corner, because this is how they respond to it. And once you pick up anything along those lines, you want to step in and, you know, I would first ask, if I have a staff member who relates to the child very well, I would first ask the member to do some outreach and see how we can really get the child to still feel that they're part of a community. And you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes, you know, they want lunch with the principal, so they'll come up just to eat with you, you know, and that may break it. But I need to get the child to agree to, one, speak to the guidance counselor, and two, I need to try to get the child involved in a particular in groups. There are times when I've had to shut down the entire basketball team because a kid who couldn't play, you know, the way they treated the kid, you know, I said, well, that's not sportsmanlike. You can't do that, because you know, the kid didn't want to come back at all. They want anything more to do with the sport. Now, granted, the kid can't play, but that's not how we do as part of a community. And, you know, I try to teach them those values and why we can say, you know, because I want you to be part of the community, you're gonna be with us on the bench, you're gonna help, you know, you're gonna do other things. We don't just shut you out, you know. Um and there are times when I would talk to the other kid, depending on who it is, and say, you know, you gotta understand what you're good at, man, brother, man. You know, you just can't do this. But it depends on how the child receives it, and even how they receive my feedback. You know, that's important.
Okay.
But that in terms of what's happening in Guyana, I think that is sorely lacking. That approach to child development, and I don't. I'm saying that, but it may not be true. It may be maybe exactly what you're saying, but in terms of growing up, I know for a fact that type of approach was not the approach that we had growing up.
And I still want to think it's not the approach that I mean we had an outlier in the house there in Washington DC. So, those things might appear to be normal in the US, but the way that even our political leaders address and deal with each other, I don't think that it could have changed because there may be people who are trying to introduce it. There may be people who are trying to bring things in, and I applaud them for it. But I don't believe that it has changed across the board where, maybe an educator would even be paying attention to certain things. Now, of course, it's a thin line because you don't want to have a child develop into an adult who is fragile, who, when they are in academia or when they are in research or when they're in the workplace, they don't understand how to deal with rejection and what should happen with rejection. So with all I've said before, we're also trying to get the child to understand coping mechanisms and coping skills and how to build your confidence with self talk, self care, knowing who you are, loving yourself. So there's that other side to it too. Because you don't want to create an egg that as soon as it falls, it breaks.
Okay. Thank
Andy,
you for that.
can I just interject there? So
Yeah,
because
sure.
that I think is a very important point. We have the advantage of having grown up in the Caribbean, grown up in Guyana specifically, and then we've moved to the United States, and in a sense, we've been able to kind of filter some of the cultural practices in the United States through this lens of the Caribbean. And so I think there are ways in which our our Caribbean experience should inform our American experience. And then there are ways in which this American experience should inform our Caribbean experience. And it should be kind of like a positive cycle. So it should go in the positive direction, Caribbean informing US, US informing Caribbean and going up. Sometimes what's happening is that it's going in not in the up direction, but it's going in the down direction, because we're not getting the right balance. And I was interested to hear, I wanted to hear what kind of Antoine was thinking in terms of like how he see this balance, kind of playing itself out. As Dr. Luarch said, there's a certain, and we see it if we're honest, we see it in our children, right? We see a certain kind of fragility in them. We see, for example, like this moment where, we all understood, like, let's say, for example, we go to some place and we have to do something and we understand, okay, boy, you just come there. You're not going to get a 1 million chances to come. So whatever have to happen is like a man who jump in a pool and say, or jump in a river and understand it didn't matter what happened here. I swim into the other side. I can get to the other side. Now, our children don't have this same kind of like, and maybe they can't, but this is a it's a disposition that I think is something that when we lose it, when our kids lose it, that we've lost something important in our place, and it's something something I'd be interested in hearing, how Antoine kind of understands this kind of balance, this kind of thing of maybe the thriving that comes from being the guy who's baking the pone to later being that this was a good experience. So maybe you don't want your kids to be baking pone all the time, but you want them to develop the shells that come from having gone through that kind of experience so that they know that, okay, sometimes you got to put your head down and you have to do some things. And or what are the equivalent experiences that we ought to be trying to construct for them in this new place that give them that kind of, hardiness that I think sometimes, we're seeing too much of, not enough of that hardiness among our children.
Okay, Antoine, you want to take that?
Yeah, because this man keep calling me name a couple of times. I'm like, is what happened with he tonight?
Yeah. No.
A couple of things that are coming up from what Dr. Lord was saying, but what Dr. Blackman was saying, what Compton and Rennie was saying is that let us ask ourselves a question here. Each of the six of us, how many of us are still children on the inside, even though we are adults? We are in adult bodies with child's minds. Because some of what Dr. Lord was talking about, what Dr. Blackman was talking about, is very often the child who may have experienced rejection and not learned how to manage that rejection. Like you were saying, Dr. Lord, learn how to develop the necessary coping skills and to be able to mitigate, to deal with, to learn how to be resilient, to bounce back, withdraws and becomes less than. And for the rest of their life, they go through life with this deficit, this confidence deficit. So they're always questioning themselves. They're always second guessing. They're always not willing to take the best foot and take a risk, to be vulnerable. And so they develop all sorts of masks and all sorts of shells and all sorts of framework behind which to hide, including using language. But one of the things I think that allows us an opportunity, look, there are pros and cons for a number of different things going on in our worlds, in our very lives. Coming from Guyana, we have got the benefit of a post-colonial or a colonialist experience, but also an education that is a little more globalized. Okay? We're coming from an experience that in a sense is still pretty raw. So we come into the United States with, as Dr. Blackman says, a kind of, I'm not going to really say a filter, but I will say a preparation. We've come already with some kind of preconceived, developed a perspective or outlook towards life. And we come into the American environment and we see what the Americans are helping us do as Guyanese is contextualize, put in perspective, organize. But we still have our background. That gave us the strength, and that allowed us, because we've already experienced the proving ground back in Guyana. We've already experienced what it's like, the raw rejection or the raw acceptance, because that is what it fundamentally is. Regardless of whether we're in Guyana or in the United States, it's fundamentally about acceptance. How can I be accepted? How will you accept me? And what do we both need to do to make that happen so that both of us can coexist in one space? It's about acceptance. And once again, constructs, the multi-layered aspects of that acceptance goes back to our childhood. For us coming from Guyana, we would have experienced all sorts of things that played into our acceptance and rejection, because acceptance and rejection go hand in hand. You cannot have one without the other. There is an ongoing tension there. And it is always going to be unresolved as long as we're alive. It is one of the fundamental tensions that will always exist. Seeking acceptance and managing rejection throughout all of our lives. The difference we have, though, is that the lessons that we would have learned when we were younger about both acceptance and rejection fortifies us, strengthens us, builds us into who we are today. Because don't for 1 minute think that none of the 6 of us are still not struggling with both acceptance and rejection in various different forms in our lives today. But how we deal and how we manage and interact with that acceptance or rejection is dependent, as Dr. Blackman was saying, on the formative years and what lessons we can bring from then to now. And then how we then mold those experiences to help us to take us through for the next one. So when we're dealing with children in schools in the United States today, they don't have the benefit of what we had. You know how many times I fly over the handlebar and knock out one or both teeth? Okay? Because the bicycle hit a stone in the road. But I got up. I went home, wash up my mouth with some salt water, hide from my mother so she don't see that I had a bus slip, because I would get another cut ass for that. That's a whole nother conversation. But then I got up and I learned to ride. That I actually did a bicycle ride from Georgetown to Lethem in 1991 and back. Now, that's a whole nother conversation, because riding that long distance without any lubrication between your legs or anything like that, that's extremely painful, trust me. But what I'm saying is I got up and I was able to ride again. And then similarly with all of my relationships. So I have reached a point in my life, as I'm sure many of you have as well, is that you have navigated, you have learned how to negotiate, how to navigate, how to compromise, so that you are able to get back up after a rejection, whether it may seem slight or significant. Because even the slightest rejection can have a long-lasting effect. Even the slightest rejection can make you question your sense of self, your confidence, your masculinity, your femininity, your place in this world, your place in your family, who you are. The slightest rejection can hearken all the way back to something in childhood that was never resolved. And so, like Dr. Lord was saying just in terms of dealing with the children, is providing the children with the opportunities, the tools, the mechanisms, so that they can learn that not every rejection is an abject failure. So that they can learn that not every rejection is the end of the world. That you may be able now to scour in your mind as you're working with this child to say, well, what other opportunity is there for this child to be able to rebound and use that opportunity as a way to leverage out of what may be a rejection pit, if you want to call it. And I will grant you, Dr. Lord, that for many young people in the American environment who have not been able to successfully manage rejection is how we end up with Columbine, is how we end up with Sandy Hook, is how we end up with Stony Douglas. Okay? Because these are young people who have not been encouraged or been able to see that rejection is a part of life. Rejection is part of the acceptance fabric that is humanity, that is part of the bonds. It is part of the fabric of humanity that we are. Listen to me. The 6 of us right here, who knows, for whatever reasons you may have, or we each may have with each other, to reject each other for whatever reason, either spoken or unspoken, that we may inadvertently reject one of us, one or other of us. And that rejection can hearken to something from our childhood that was never resolved. And that can undermine our sense of self right this very minute. Right this very minute, undermine our confidence right this very minute. and going back to a young child, going back to an adolescent who has never really been encouraged to learn, to develop the tools, the mechanisms to rebound, to come out of that temporary rejection pit, that they can carry it on through their lives. It can affect their mental health in such a way, their sense of self, where I do not think I am worthy. I do not think I am good enough. I do not think that I have a place in my family. I do not have a place in my community. I do not have a place in this world. So I will choose to escape. And my means of escape can either be alcohol or drugs. My means of escape can be denying my sexual identity or my sexual orientation and having sex with as many different people, men and women. My escape can be working myself to the bone and being the pleaser every time. My escape can be, I am just tired. I can't do this anymore. And I start thinking of suicide. Because a rejection was not dealt with. I agree with David Modeste that acceptance and rejection are both a double-edged sword. That is in some ways a direct result of our culture of discipline and acceptance of authority without challenge. It can in many ways either make or break someone. I agree. But it's a dynamic that is vital to who we are as individuals. It is a dynamic that is vital to our human to the fabric of the bonds that we create with each other.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
I would like to expand a little, or at least do another dynamic with the discussion, where the connection with abuse in the family, and where, as part of the dynamic that we were talking about in the power dynamic, where the male is rejected over and over and over. So he has got to now project his masculinity, not in a positive way, but in a negative way, and become the abuser. So there's also that connection also, Antoine, where the person is rejected. While in the United States, you might use guns, but in terms of our society, you use your physical hands and things like that to our own relatives and friends, not to strangers. So we need to also, going back to the point that was made in terms of the schools, we need to be able to recognize that there's need for intervention when these negative processes are happening.
Okay. All right. We getting close to the closing hour. And I want to put this final question to everybody, and then to Antoine to discuss it from a psychological perspective. Now, this is something that came up a couple conversations back, where we're talking about the person who seems lost in society. Now, I bring this up to address the an issue that humankind hasn't been able to deal with, right? So how do you heal? What exactly can such a person be told? And in this instance, we're talking about the children of mixed parentage. Now, I was reading something where a young lady, a friend, noticed that, in this instance, it was a white guy. He noticed that one day a white parent came for her, then the next day a black, and then the next, and he noticed this back and forth. And he looked at her and he called her a mutt one day, right? And then that is when she became conscious of her difference, so to speak. Now, we know that society is very far from addressing that whole scheme in a functional manner. So what I want, is given each of your experiences in life, how do you think society should address that scenario? And I'll start with you, Renita.
Well, if we, this whole thing about race and this whole thing about which people having the misconception that one race might be superior to the other race, etc., is the problem. Is the problem. If we would just see each other as human beings and respect each other's right to exist and learn tolerance and embrace our diversity and our differences, a lot of our problems will go away. So to me, addressing a child as a mutt, no intelligent adult would do something like that, right? That's a child. That child is not responsible for who he or she is in terms of race. So if we want to really deal with this as a as a people, as a species, we get rid of this whole race differentiation and definition of blacks, whites, yellows, brown. I'm not going to touch a religion if we stick at race. So if we just start embracing our humanness, we're human beings of different hues. That might be the beginning of a solution. Forget white, black, yellow, brown, whatever the other colors might be. We're human beings, and address each other and respect each other as human beings sharing this planet. I think that will be the beginning of a solution. Because once we realize that we just have different hues and different texture of hair and different eye color, everything else is the same. We function the same, 4 chambers, and we have the same body functions and everything. We just look differently outside, and our hair textures might be different. That's the only difference. If we start to look at those things and move away from race, I think that might be the beginning of a solution of this mixed race and this race and that race issue that we currently have. And then no race will feel superior, if we all realize that we are all human beings and of the human race. That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Renita. Terence, as a mathematician, as a father, um, as a Afro-Guyanese and African-American, how do you see this?
As a father of a mixed race child.
Yes, this is exactly what I was about to say. I say that this is a question that I deal with every day. My wife is Russian, and so my daughter is a mixed race child, and so this question of who she is and what she is and how she is, and and how I mean, so even how I see myself in her, right? That's a question that comes up all the time in my house, and I have to say that we argue about it a lot. Because I think I have some strong views about how she ought to see herself. Her mother has strong views about how she ought to see herself, and we're slowly discovering that she has very strong views about how she should see herself. So, I think this is a hard problem for me. I do think that the thing I've tried to do, and so this is where I would respond to your question about how do you heal. I would flip that around. In my view, what I've tried to say is this is who you are, right? And there's nothing wrong, and so there's no pathology here. You don't need to heal it. You just need to be, but in that needing to be, you have to, in a way, find yourself. And what I always hope is that we're in a culture where whether we like it or not, sometimes black is not is not valued in the same way as others. And so, sometimes maybe I get a little nervous that, my daughter, I'm speaking from a purely personal place. Other people will have, so I'm not being abstract. I mean, I get a little nervous that, she's not going to really appreciate and value the wisdom that her father brings. It's kind of like sometimes you sit there and, someone will come and tell you something, and your father's sitting there telling you exactly this, but you're not valuing it in the way that you should value it, because you're subliminally seeing the world through some lens that are not necessarily the right lens to see the world. So, I mean, I mean, I, I don't want to bring my own business to this thing here, but I have lived for the last 14 years trying to, simple things like, let me give an example. A simple thing that you would never think about prior to having a child, but then when you do, you have to think about it, right? So the question of, how to braid the hair, right? So, you then realize that someone's got to braid the hair, and if you don't know how to do it, and then you realize, well, your wife doesn't have any experience in doing this kind of job, so then you have to find someone and this creates, like, this becomes a special kind of job now that somehow has some dimension beyond a normal dimension of, just getting your hair braided, right? So there are many issues here that go to young men and women who come from racially mixed families. And I think I agree with Renita in the sense that, the goal is to see each other as human beings and to kind of broadly embrace, our humanity and so on, and embrace our diversity. But I also know that there's a real world in which we travel, and sometimes that's very, very difficult. And, I've had way more experiences than I want to talk about in this context about, simple things like going to a supermarket and, someone trying to decide, who's the family in this moment that corresponds to this bag of goods, right? So and what are the potential implications for that for a child? So there are many issues here, and I don't have all the answers. I mean, I think that the goal is, as Renita has articulated, but I do know that in getting to that goal, there's a lot of stuff that you have to deal with. And I don't think, I mean, anyway, not to make myself special, but to also say that, we come from a country where, I'm sure that, children of Afro and Indo-Guyanese marriages have had to deal with some of these elements, perhaps not in the same way that we deal with them in the United States. But, this is something for us to that's an entire show. You should probably do an entire show on that aspect.
Definitely.
I can't be just your last question throwing it away. So I end there and wait for the next show. When
Come to your quick take on it.
I look at history, Andy. I really do, and how badly we have been treated. How badly we have been treated, and we have to think of reparations. We have to think of that the society that the Caucasian society owes us. That's how I see it. That we have been for hundreds of years being bad-mouthed and talked about and talked down to, and our sweat has built up the first world, and nothing is coming back to us. That's how I see it. As simple as that is economics.
Okay. Michelle?
I'm sorry, guys, but I kind of see this a little different from me. I am at a place in life where I recognize that I cannot expect anything from anyone. I have to expect from myself. And therefore, I'm at a point where I believe we need to begin to love ourselves. And if we think about, and I'm purely starting from where Compton is ending, where he's saying, we've been hurt, we've been beaten. But I wasn't hurt or beaten, to be honest with you. I mean, I know my ancestors were, and I know some of it is coming down. But I was not exactly hurt or beaten. But I need to fix whatever pain I have residual from that before I can expect anything. I have to be able to kind of love myself. I have to be able to talk to myself. I have to see myself as beautiful. If I'm going to love you who look very similar to me or you who are different from me, I have to first start from me. I also believe sometimes the world can be a mirror of how we view things and how we perceive things to be. And therefore, if we don't really think through things and meditate and really get to know who you are as a person, then anywhere the wind blows, you're going to blow with it. So for me, that child needs to first, and I was very happy when Terence said, she expresses herself how she chooses. I'm happy for that. Like that's her expression. Okay. We cannot live our lives through them anymore. That's her expression. We did our part already. We have to embrace it. We have to really think about how she can really love herself or any child like that, or any black child or any white child. Because while I am not black, while I'm not white, I still believe that white kids have their own things that they have to face. But I've never experienced that, so I don't know. So I think that inner strength, that self-talk, you know, we had a thing in Guyana where we say, sticks and bricks may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. That's a blatant lie because words hurt more. And we have a self-fulfilling prophecy where in our culture you say you're not gonna make nothing good with yourself. You from the generation of vipers, and we've heard these things all the time. We have to purge ourselves from those things, and we have to begin to show love for ourselves, then for others, especially, and then for everyone. But for I cannot embrace the world hoping for that change without first changing me. I have to do it. Only me.
And thank you for that, Michelle. Antoine, you can close us off on the psychological perspective.
You stump Anton tonight, boy.
Nah, nah.
He's trying to process the different views.
So the first thing I want to acknowledge is thank you, Dr. Blackman, for your vulnerability, for being able and having the courage and the language to express your thoughts and your uncertainties and the difficulties that you're struggling with, especially having a mixed race daughter and what that means in today's context. And given all of your own history and the current life that we're living that brings it all together, that can be very unsettling, daunting, and difficult to process on a daily basis. So I can't even begin to imagine. And so I want to just simply acknowledge and thank you for being vulnerable with that experience. The other thing that jumps out in my mind, and I know that you're gonna probably have fun with this in your mind when I say it, is when Dr. Lord talked just now about the world outside of us is a reflection of ourselves, that we are microcosms of that world. What came to my mind just now, Dr. Blackmon, was fractal theory. Okay? But then I want to move on now. I just throw that because that when Dr. Lord said it, that jumped to my mind right away, fractal theory. But I think in large part, we are confronted today with concepts and ideas and behaviors and attitudes that seem to drive us apart and prevent us from accepting both ourselves and each other. We began this evening with a conversation on rejection. And I suggest to you that we bring the end of this conversation that acceptance is just as much part of rejection, that we cannot consider and continue on rejection without discussing and including the importance of acceptance. And without acceptance, there is going to be rejection. So I just created a circular argument there, so leave me alone. But what I think is important, however, is acceptance of self is integral to acceptance of the other. So today, I'm a lot more accepting of me than I was 10 years ago. And I am still in the process of accepting aspects about myself. One of the things that I say to people when I'm doing mental health trainings and I'm talking about acceptance, regardless, and I really don't care about the 6 of you, look at yourselves butt naked in the mirror. Look at yourselves from head to toe, butt naked in the mirror. See yourself. Look at each part of your body. Why you like it, why you don't like it, what it looks like, how it doesn't look like. And consider this, that the image you see looking back at you in the mirror is an amalgam of all of who have said to you in your life of who they think you are. Do you really know who you are when you look in the mirror? Or is it all of the people who have told you who they think you are, that is who you see looking back at you in the mirror? So then when you look in that full-length mirror at yourself, butt-ass naked, who is it that's looking back at you? And to that person who's looking back at you in the mirror, do you accept that person? And if you reject any part of yourself or that person, why are you rejecting that person? Why are you rejecting that part of yourself? Because if you can accept yourself for who you are, warts, farts, and all, then you can accept the other person. Because I don't know what baggage Andy is carrying with him. I don't know that Andy's sitting in front here with me on this camera. I don't know all the stuff Andy's got that he is putting aside just to come and sit here with us this evening. I don't know what Michelle is dealing with. So why would I reject Andy and Michelle just because of how they look? Yeah, they're both wearing glasses. So are they deficient because they're wearing glasses? Are they less than because they're wearing glasses? Are they less than because they're black? Now we know the construct of race as a sociological construct emerged in the mid to late 17th century. So prior to that, how were we viewed? We know that the Spanish royalty had a black queen. We know that Victoria had a black goddaughter. We know that blacks occupied prominent positions in Europe. We know that the Moors who came from northern Africa ruled Spain and Portugal, the Iberian Peninsula, for 700 years. So who were we before the sociological racial construct in the mid 17th century? Who were we? And who are we today? How much more deficient, how much more less than are we today than we really should be? Are we less than? When we look at ourselves in the mirror as 6 Black people, who do we see looking back at us? Do we see looking back at us a person, a Black person who is less than? Do we judge ourselves by whose standard? By a white person's standard? How do we judge ourselves? And again, I will say to you, how you judge yourself is the way you judge others. Because you're going to replicate that. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm done.
Very much so.
Thank you, Antoine. And thank you all of you, on Facebook and YouTube who stay with us. I'm sure you would have found it a very, very informative discussion.
Andy,
Yes, Rennie.
Andy,
Yes,
I
Rennie.
just wanted to add one thing. I wanted to
Okay,
add
so go
that
ahead.
we must embrace our tribe or our group or whoever we can really lean into. You need to embrace them in order to really cleanse yourself and really love yourself. And we need to forgive ourselves for any pain that we may have caused ourselves.
And caused others too.
But by virtue, one leads to the other.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I agree there. Renita, take us out.
Anton, you know the song, huh? Anton,
While I die over here.
you recognize the song?
When you look in the mirror, tell me what you see.
That's
It
a
is
song.
what it is, who you think you are or who do you like to be.
Yep, that's a song. Y'all never heard that song?
It doesn't ring a bell for me, but maybe if I hear it, I might recognize it.
Take those words and Google it, and then you see the song. Yep.
I can take Michael Jackson, the man.
Man in the mirror.
Man in the
Exactly.
mirror.
The man in the mirror.
Man in the mirror. Yep.
Yep. Anyway, Google that. That's a nice song. I won't sing it because I don't want to scare you guys. Anyway, thank you guys again for giving up your time on the Friday evening. A nice, beautiful summer-like Friday evening to impart knowledge as usual. Great information. Peel back the onion, peel back layers, open up. The question that we had in the beginning opened up so much memories for me. And I'm hoping that I was never rude to anyone or rejected anyone to the point that they might, as Antoine was saying, might mold or formulate who they are today. Because when you're teenagers and children, I think there's a lot of things we don't realize, the things we do, how they impact others today. So when that opening question, Andy really took me back. And I was one of those who used to say, no, I don't want to dance, not right now, stuff like that. So if there's anybody out there that I might have rejected, I apologize. Yeah.
Don't need to
I'm
apologize.
Yeah. And on behalf of my sisters, if any one of you guys were rejected, I apologize. I'm blaming it on ignorance because it wasn't done out. I don't think it was ever done out of malice. Thinking back, at least for myself, it wasn't done out of malice or malintent. So, but you guys just took me way back and peeled some onions, some layers that I never thought about until tonight. So, well, Dr. Luar, Dr. Blackman, Antoine, and Compton, thank you so much. Our viewers, our Facebook followers and comments, thank you so much because you guys could have been doing something else. So Everyone, stay safe. You know, for those of you who have not been vaccinated, stay safe. I'm not going to advocate, but just want you to stay safe. Andy, thank you for a very interesting topic. And I guess we'll see you guys all next week. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
I'm gonna make
Good
phone
night.
tomorrow.
Good night.
Take care.
Antoine, don't Google the song.
I'm gonna make phone tomorrow. Me looking at no song. I gotta make phone tomorrow. We talk about baking phone all night.
Oh, you
All
gotta
night we talk about baking phone. I gotta make phone tomorrow.
Oh, okay. All right, guys.
Goodbye.
Have a
Alright,
good
guys.
night.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
What is knowledge? And how much of it must we acquire in order to better our lives? What makes some forms of knowledge seemingly more advantageous than others? What fuels this desire to learn and to know and to understand? And how much of what we learn is actually applied to the bettering of our lives? Is it necessary to know in order to grow? Join us, a group of former Guyanese high schoolers and our special guests, as we chat about the things we need to know and about education and the process of learning in the tech age. This is The Trending Mind, Friday evenings at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time on Facebook.